Welcome to Slow is Good, a podcast for entrepreneurs who want to think outside of the box to grow slow and have a greater impact. In this podcast, we'll talk everything business, but most importantly, we'll talk slow business, digital strategies, creativity, some Franglish, and a load of human touch. I'm Geraldine Juppé. I'm a slowpreneur, ex-startup founder. I'll be your host. I'll share ideas, strategies, and more with joy and slowliness. Enjoy the listen. Hello there. You know how much I love to gather people around discussions, exploration. I want to expand an invitation to the next summit, to the next Bloossoming experience from December 4th to December 9th. I'm gathering entrepreneurs, like-minded leaders, slowpreneurs, conscious leaders, healers, and more. And together, we're going to be discussing keys and transformations around the path to gratitude. So this conference is fully international. We have entrepreneurs from all over the world, from France, from New Zealand, from Canada, from the US. And together, we want to bring the knowledge and connect. So if you feel the call, join us. And if you want more details, visit geraldinejubé.com. I hope to see you there. Enjoy this episode of Slow is Good. Hello, hi. Welcome to another episode of Slow is Good. For today, I have an amazing guest coming from Brussels, Jean-Philippe Steeger, who's going to be talking about the power of communication with us. Bonjour, Jean-Philippe. Hi.
Bonjour, Geraldine. Thanks for inviting me.
We have the chance to be multilingual. I know that you do speak French, English, but also German. So not going to try my German for the day, but I would like you to introduce yourself to our community here in Montreal.
Yes, thank you, Geraldine. As you said, my name is Jean-Philippe Steeger. I've French, German, Romanian background actually, and now I live in the center of Europe, so to say, or what has been called the center of Europe in Brussels. I was for a long time engaged in more in politics and try to change the world and make it a better place. And that's why also I came to Brussels. I studied political sciences, started to work as a lobbyist here in Brussels, and trying to make things better by working on sustainability, trying to green employment, etc. And then there came a time where I had to realize that that changing the world outside is also says a lot. What you want to change says a lot about yourself actually, and it made click in the moment where someone came with a Big Mac to a meeting on climate change and human rights, and there was. But I mean, don't you see the hypocrisy? But then I also had to really realize myself. Okay, talking about climate, and then do I take the choice to take the plane, etc. To really also be coherent in what we are saying and how we are discussing about issues. So that was a research, and that brought me also into like kind of a personal learning journey with coaching. And later I founded Perspectivist, my regenerative communication agency, to be more aligned with my values, but also just with how I am actually, because I feel like the modern world of work is often very alienating and artificial. So my research was really how can we tap back into authenticity, into deeper ways of relating, into refertilizing what is on our attention, because for me that's really probably the essence of communication is what do we share, how do we share what is on our attention, and so I've been working around that for the last year and years actually. and we had the pleasure to also to work together with Sommet des Slowpreneurs. So there was also a great kind of exploration of communications as slowpreneurs. What does it mean to share actually our passion for what we're doing as entrepreneurs, for a better world, but also for personally as an entrepreneur. So it was also a great occasion for me to question my posture as slowpreneur, as entrepreneur. So also a big learning with this respect to take the time to slow down and really feel what wants to emerge. And that's what happened for me for Perspectivist. Once I let go of this rush to okay, I have to deliver. But this was then not aligned to really to who I am and what my call is in a way. So
And I
so
really
today
like
I'm
the
grateful for this also painful realization sometimes. Mm.
I really like the idea that you're bringing, perspective is what it means for you. But going back to first, before even diving into what your agency does and how it serves the world, like your essence as a person, as an optimist, as a change maker, from, I will say, like you mentioned it, like you're no longer in politics, but isn't it like sometimes to be committed to our beliefs, to things that are important to us? Some act like political, posture. Can you tell us a little bit about usually where your essence stands?
Mhm. No, I think it's a really important question. Our posture as communicator, as an entrepreneur. What is our attitude? What is our I would say more than attitude and more than something cognitive. It's also something embodied. So I think this question about our own role is really important because it links our deeper inner truths with the world. No, I mean, we can use ikigai, for example, as an orientation, um,
Mm-hmm.
or other things. So for me, it was really a change of posture from this, kind of convincing others, influencing, lobbying towards more reciprocal communications, and not just
Mm-hmm.
reciprocal but ecosystemic. So, of course, it's about giving and taking. So also listening, which we don't do very much in today's world of communications in marketing or even in our conversations in society. So for me, it's really going into a deep listening posture, um, and um, and holding space to let things come. And I think when we create conversation spaces, when we create imagination spaces, when we create safe and welcoming communication spaces, I think there's a lot that can emerge. So it's really being more of a steward rather than unfortunately today many communicators, I think, and marketers understand themselves as part of a bigger machine, that needs data analysts and strategists and of course content creators, but everything is kind of boxed, everything is departmentalized, and I think that takes so much away from the aliveness of communications and the magic that happens when there is deep listening, when there is also this sensual aspect to communication. So I would say, it's a really a change in posture towards.
Mm-hmm.
Um, of course, not opposing data analytics is not bad as such. That's not what I'm trying to say, but it is placing it in its right place. So it has a role,
Yeah.
but it can. So I think there's something for kind of if you want to say it, qualitative and quantitative approach to communications, but also other things, of course. So to really reintegrate what we have been doing and seeing what is in balance, what is not in balance. And I think today many things are not in balance. So this also changes our posture towards the world as steward, as I said, but maybe also as healers, because in the end,
Mm-hmm.
it's about overcoming the division. Even if we're well intended to solve climate change and growing social inequality, we won't do this with the same way we have been trying to influence others that we are right. No, maybe also the other also has a point of the truth. Even conspiracy theories have a little part is maybe true. So although the rest is based, of course, on fear, and so that cannot, of course, be regenerative. But I think there's really this mindset change to see things as complementary, as that the diversity is there in society, among people, in nature
Yeah.
as well, and for a reason, because the ecosystem is healthier when there is more integration of diversity. So we
Mm-hmm.
know that in social systems and in ecological systems. So then my role changes if I look at how can I be a communicator within my ecosystem. I will benefit if my ecosystem is healthy. So that's really a change in posture from this ego-centric communications, making others do something that I want, from um, inviting maybe people to
Mm-hmm.
create something together and work more ecosystemically as part of something bigger.
I want to
Um,
go back to some, I mean, important definition here, because maybe some people might have different interpretation what means regenerative communication. To your knowledge, you have a full experience using this approach, but what does it mean per se to use regenerative approaches in all different spectrum of the realm of work?
hmm. I think it's a good question, because probably usually we have the tendency to to kind of define what it is, and I feel there's maybe some more there's there's more kind of opportunity there when we're trying to host a diversity of definitions. So how can we kind of look at regenerative communications from different perspectives? So just to say that to because if I say what I think is regenerative communications, I'm putting my label on it, and it's always not the whole picture. So just saying this, but for me, regenerative communications is really aligning communications back to life, and that means to look really for the conditions in our communication ecosystems that
Mm-hmm.
enable our way of talking, our way of visualizing, our way of listening, our way of writing stories, sharing stories in a way that is conducive to life, that is promoting things like understanding, love, etc. And yeah, I draw a lot of inspiration from nature there, because nature has some ways of communicate.
With different
Communications
lenses, and what is yours?
is an expression that is maybe not very accessible. People maybe don't necessarily understand what regenerative communications is. So that's why I also try to use other words communications that enable conditions to thrive, or others. So for me, there are actually a diversity of potential definitions, I would say, of what it could be. And it always depends on who we're talking to, in which community, in which place, in which culture. So it will always be unique, and it will always try to look at this particular ecosystem niche, etc. But probably we can get inspiration from both from nature and marginalized perspectives on what regenerative communications is. If we look at nature, how it communicates, for example, in the forest, is through mycelial networks, but also pheromones in the air, for example. So And I have chosen a spider as a symbol of perspectivist because I feel they are the kind of masters of weaving webs that connect ecosystems and that are sensitive to the
Mhm.
energies in the forest. And so there were some experiments done by Tomás Saraceno that you can also check if you're interested on
Mhm.
spiders, on how they react to music, for example. So I think it's a beautiful analogy for the role as a communicator in an ecosystem to be receptive to what is going on and what is needed. How do we, as communicator, help our community to channel attention to where it is needed? And because today I think we have to acknowledge we live in a quite toxic world, and our communication environments are quite toxic. So it's starting with regenerating the soil of communication. So which is of can be fear, which marketing uses a lot, of course. It can be, of course, more like instant gratification, short joys, dopamine kicks, etc. So this is definitely not the regenerative communications approach. Is really looking at how
Yeah.
can we create fertile attention landscapes that invite us to reimagine how we live together, that invite us to yeah to have conversations that matter and that are relevant for a particular community, for an organization, etc. Um, and yeah, I would say regenerative communications is really kind of weaving communications in a way that enable transformation, concrete transformation. So it's an enabler that uses imagination, an enabler that uses conversation, that uses many things, but in a regenerative way that integrates the wisdom of the past and of the present, of our present moment. So it's not going back to the past, but really going into the living in the now, and going into the future with this wisdom. And I think there's also a lot to learn from indigenous cultures on their forms of communicating. Like for example, having a circle, conversation circles, or of course also as a spiritual dimension, maybe of really also connecting to what is more than
Mhm.
human, because in the end we're just part of the web of life, and there's some wisdom that we cannot seize. So I guess it's also being really in reverence to that, to the wisdom of the greater whole, um, and always, yeah, I think showing up with some humility with regards to that. We don't know, but we can learn to listen and listen to these indigenous voices, for example, that have so much to say about how nature communicates, and how this could enrich our practice.
But if you're looking at something that is closer to us, because you were referring to using ancient wisdom, so there's different periods or era of wisdom, right? And we had like wars, we had colonialism. How can we learn from this and actually, from a regenerative communication standpoint, learn from that and build the communication of the future?
Mhm. I think that's really the challenge, is really how can we learn to listen to these forgotten perspectives. You mentioned colonialism. So how can we really start to listen to these perspectives that have been silenced, that have been killed, that have been marginalized historically? And I think there is a lot of efforts going on right now to learn how to do this.
Hmm.
Um, but my impression is, for example, there was this Beyond Growth conference at the European Parliament, and which talked for, yeah, maybe the first time about perspectives beyond GDP growth. So which was quite quite new, quite courageous, I would say. But at the same time, conversations were quite framed from, I would say, really European perspective, and there were
Hmm.
only a few voices like Vandana Shiva that didn't fit this. Yeah, the white crowd first of all, but then also maybe more importantly the worldview. And so if we're talking about nature like a resource, even in post growth approaches, then I think we won't go far. And so it's really also questioning um, our perspectives on things, and I think we can only learn if we really learn to deeply listen, of also to accept that there are different ways of looking at the world, and I think that's really the basics, and to be open to there being different ways of looking at the world, that there are, and
I
that we
really
can learn from
love
it.
I
Mm.
really love the fact that you're bringing that aspect of the importance of having these multiple layers and multiple lenses that are important in order to nurture actually our thought processes, our minds, and also our spirit in terms of how we want to communicate and with the intention that we want to have in these way of communicating. But now there's also a reality that as humans, we do all have biases. How can we question ourselves as human beings with the different backgrounds that we might have? Me as a black woman, for example, you as a white man, for example. How can we tap into the different stories that we have but still build that communication with strength, with openness for the future?
Mm. I think that's probably the question we need to really explore more, because that will really decide upon yeah, our very future. So will we be able to come together again beyond our divisions, and yeah, bring these perspectives together, that we need to heal as a society, that we need to heal our natural ecosystems, and yeah, I use again the metaphor of the spider, because I like to think in terms of communications as web weaving, and like a spider, you would start somewhere to find your kind of the outside layer. So how can we connect different perspectives, like and create yeah, create kind of this web from outside perspectives, as you're weaving trees together. So the different perspectives that will make up your unique web, and I think you mentioned unconscious biases. We can probably use some tools to help us do that,
Hmm.
but only, of course, if you already did this kind of listening exercise and are receptive. Otherwise, the tool will also not be helpful. So I developed a kind of web weaving tool to see at how do we integrate perspectives of Black people, LGBT, disabled people, etc., in our communications, in our narrative, in our language, and so much more. So to really also consciously reflect on how we are. Actually, which perspectives do we cover in our communications, and how do we do that, um, and I think there's so much, this is how really communications can really become deeper, more impactful, is I think by increasing the level of diversity in our communications, and the level of integration of perspectives as well. I think that's really important today, for everyone who wants to yeah, kind of move on beyond this terribly destructive trends that we see today, and division and non-understanding and ignoring and silencing, etc., that is happening, particularly also on social media platforms. So
Yeah.
that's the context we're working in today.
The context of today is, well, to my knowledge, very complex. And I think will become more and more complex because we have different platforms, we have different ecosystems, we have different, of course, biases and diversities and all that. But now, how do you integrate, and how do you think we could integrate that notion of intersectionality in our communication, in our way of doing things, not necessarily from a communication standpoint, but globally?
Hmm. I think we have probably looked at intersectionality as sometimes as an accumulation of different diversity traits, as just being multiple experiences of discriminations, which it is. But I think it is also an invitation um, really to learn from one another, maybe to create also alliances between, I don't know, for example, for you as being a black woman. How do you connect to the feminine, to being black, or for me as a gay white man with Romanian, French, German parents, um, how do I connect with my inner diversity? And I think that's the first question of how we then will make sense of diversity in the outside world. So first, to recognize what is this richness, to
Mm-hmm.
reframe it also as richness, because
Mm-hmm.
I think for a long time it has been marginalized and diminished to be different, right? To Then maybe a mainstream culture. But even in the mainstream culture, I think even in let's say old white privileged men, they have also diverse traits in them. I think that they don't. Maybe dare to look at because of fear, because of social convention, because of many things, and so it's. I think it's really an invitation to dive into our own essence, into our own inner
Mm-hmm.
intersectionalities, to see opportunities of in the outside world in communicating. So I will give you an example. I've worked with a leadership community, for example, that is also yeah. Looking inside, or we have been I've been coaching them, and so we were kind of looking at their own essence as a brand, as an organization, um, and then there was a moment where, yeah, kind of new pathways emerged because of something that they felt deeply within. So in that case, it was a profoundly female wisdom, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
um, a sense of a wish of being able to become ancestors for the next generations, to become elders, so to also transmit some wisdom. And the third thing that emerged was kind of building a bridge between the world of business and spirituality.
Of
Uh,
course.
so that's really something then they had inside themselves. It was linked to their self perception, or if you want to say identity. And this informed then also how in the outside world, where is the fertile soil where we can plant our seeds to grow our communications, but also maybe the business, the services that we offer, etc. So in this case, I use communications as kind of it is a kind of a way of becoming conscious of something, and then opening really doors to new possibilities and new pathways that we can open through communications, through that is self-reflective, that is looking into essence, but it is also, of course, looking at a reality and that is out there. So how do we connect both? And I think that's the question. And that's the what I would call this weaving part of communications. So this intersectionality, I think, is really in all of us, and I think we need to carefully learn to listen again to it, and then I think that's probably the first single most important thing to do is to to learn to listen to ourselves again, probably, and
Mm-hmm.
with compassion, because that has, I think, become very, very rare in a world where we are bombarded with images of people who look sexier, more intelligent, etc., than us, and
Mm-hmm.
creating scarcity in a way in our attention landscapes. So,
But what you're
whereas,
what you're raising actually is very interesting in the sense that we need to be more of ourselves in order to breach that communication landscape where we're using deep listening, deep compassion that can emerge for the future, right? But now the question I'll have is like, can we have that deep listening as a global community, so to make sure that at the essence of that change we also integrate that notion, as you mentioned, of diversity and embrace that intersectionality as well.
Mhm. I think it's probably. I'm not sure we can change the world maybe through yeah, one communication initiative, let's say, or a campaign, or whatever. So I feel as probably need to go back to community and go back to place, and really weave between what is within us, what is within the community, and what is between communities. Because I think there's an intelligence at multiple levels. I mean, there's our inner wisdom that wants to be that wants to come out. I think that wants to radiate, so to say. You mentioned yeah, I'm not sure which word you use, but I think it was shining. I'm not sure now. So and kind of creating attraction, so to say, or um, being your whole self, um, really creates yeah, creates kind of a pull. So it's a change in, again, a change in posture, because people
Mm-hmm.
will come to you because of what you yeah, what vibe you emit, and it's something maybe people are interested in. So I think also for branding, I think really tapping into the energy that you bring is really super important.
Mm-hmm.
um, but as part brands, and we personally are part of communities, or more often or less and less, unfortunately. But I think there's really a sense of a need and of radical belonging, that we need also to nourish as communicators, because there's more and more loneliness, depression, etc. So it's also
Yes, absolutely.
not just, oh, I'm practicing my mindfulness and self-compassion, and that's no, that's also this individualistic mindset that I think we need to overcome, that we're not separate from others, but that we're part all part of the web of life. So to really yeah, cultivate the sense of belonging to community, whether it's for me a queer community, or also the regenerative community, which I feel like connected to. And then there is cross fertilizations between these different communities, that is there to
Mm-hmm.
nourish, also through communications. What is going on there? What can we learn from this community?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then you can use tools like this web weaving tool I mentioned, to really be conscious about, okay, maybe there is a perspective that can nourish what we're doing, that can nourish the development of our organization, our brand, etc. Um, and So between communities, and I think the last thing I would say is also that there's something, if we're talking about overcoming divisions and yeah, kind of accounting for diversity and intersectionality, um, it's also yeah, there's also something, as I also mentioned, that we maybe don't always understand. So there, I think it's really kind of we can get inspiration from wisdom traditions, from different wisdom traditions that um,
And I really love that because you bridge in what you're saying like a lot of complementary and essential these days to our strategies of communications, which is ancient wisdom, but also eco spirituality at the same time that is somehow getting a little bit lost in all these projections of anything digital that we are totally immersed and bombarded like you said. Now, from a leadership and probably communication profession like standpoint, how can we, design strategies that are effective at the same time, but strategies that integrate and implement this notion of we are part of nature as well. And so we need to protect nature somehow. And also, as a part of our nature, the nature, we also have the communities that are essential to it for ancient wisdom to thrive and evolve and also project new evolution for the
mhm,
future, especially for the next generation as well. What can we do?
mm,
Because we have, to compare to our ancestors, we have a tool that we didn't have. We have technology.
mm,
And with technology, we can communicate better, further,
mm,
in other dimensions too, right?
mhm,
So, how can we impact better so that we can create something that is more balanced
mm,
when it comes to communication?
mm. Indeed, I think there is so much diversity, as you say, out there, and so much wisdom that has been, marginalized. There is so much conflict and kind of old stories always coming back, being recycled about what we need to do right now. I'm thinking about clean tech, for example, which is just sometimes more of the same, but at the same time, and I know you're that's also what you really strongly believe in, the possibility that we can really use technology in a really fertile way. So I think it's really possible, and but I think it requires us to redesign our communications ecosystem, and more precisely our attention ecosystem. If we want if we want to have first to survive, and if we want to have to create a world where people in their uniqueness, where communities in their uniqueness, unique cultures can not just coexist but really thrive together. Um, I think
Yes.
and this is what we we want, and I hope, and I think many people want, and more than just a small share. I think then we need to really redesign our attention landscape. And what do I mean by this? Is really to imagine how a world would look like if everyone had a place in this in your imaginative landscape. So how would your landscape look like? And this would look a bit different from really from person to person and from community to community, but it will tell you a lot about how to relate between communities, uh, about which role you can play, about which
Mm,
role a brand can play, and what is really needed in the ecosystem to do to create conditions in which there can be reconciliation, in which there can be deeper
mm,
understanding, sharing wisdoms, etc. Um, so and I think, yeah, technology can definitely be an enabler, but only if we ask the right questions. So for me, really, it's also
100%.
important to live the questions, and maybe we don't have the answers right now. There's a lot of unknowns, but I think the first step is to to want to move into this direction, and to imagine, and really from the heart, why would you like different communities to thrive in the future, um, and what is your how do you relate to this? So I think it is really also deepening these questions. That's an invitation we can I think we can really we should probably do a bit more, invite a bit more in the imagination of how the world could be different, because our usual approach is to come from to start from reality, and we often say you have to speak to people at the level, to pick them up at the level they are at. I like what Carol Sanford says that this is actually diminishing the potential of people, that we should rather start inviting someone to the level of their potential. So it is, I think it is really
Yes.
not being in this mindset of people are too stupid and there are too little people that share the same mindset, and that we all anyway
Mm-hmm.
have to be like-minded. No, I think we should be different-minded. We should not be a homogeneous monocultural mass of people that are all the same, that really invite radical difference, diversity, and be radically honest about it, and compassionate, and I think then when we do that, then really magic creates and transformation becomes possible, when um, we create these conditions and these meeting spaces, for sure, between communities, conversation formats, also with what you are doing with the slowpreneurs, and to really create spaces in which new constellations are being made possible, in which people dare to be their full selves, and to shine as to develop their leadership, after all, leadership, because people find resonate with what you're saying, and not just thought leadership. It's not just something in the head, it's also a heart leadership. It's also an empowering leadership that leads you to action when it's needed, where it's needed, if it's a fertile action. So communications
Mm-hmm.
as an enabler, for sure. And so yeah, I see really the importance of reconnecting to our collective potential. Communications is, I mean, from the Latin word is to bring together, right? So I think that's what we need to do right now, is to bring together, but not with the same narratives, with the same old stories from back then, but really to dare dream bigger, and live our dream to the fullest, as part of a bigger dream. And I think we can really use storytelling, visualizations, etc., to to really give shape to this dream, and invite people to co-create this dream together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um,
I really like this word of positivity that you're sharing right now, because we absolutely, to deepen that essence of dreaming bigger, better, with more heart, with more proximity to one another. And I'd like to invite you to do a little exercise. How can we together, like right now, storytell and imagine, the communication of the future, how it will look like, what it will feel like.
hmm. I think I would invite us then, in this case, to maybe close our eyes and maybe take some deep breaths as well,
Hmm.
and then really connect to how would we like to see our lives, basically. How would we like to see ourselves living in the future, and
Hmm.
to really visualize the landscape that there is. Where do we live? Who is around us? To which places do we go?
Hmm.
And we can do that, and I think this will can really reveal some things about who is part of this dream, about what is actually my passion, about what is this community element of my dream. And I think that doing this visualization exercise can really help us to sense into what is needed to do right now to build that dream? So what kind of what will our communications look like? So is it a conversation we need to have about this dream? Is it a story we can write about how the landscape looks like, about how people came together to create this your dreamland, so to say, your dream places, um, and so yeah, I would invite you to we can open our eyes again, but to really do this exercise. I think visualization is a really powerful tool that activates the imagination, and so we can use exercises like this to open really to new perspectives, and then of course once we use the imagination also to then also critically examine, okay, who's not in the dream, right? So to use again this kind of a web weaving tool, who's not part of the dream, and what does it say about me, about how I look at the world. So so it's really inviting imagination, inviting our dream, but also looking at relating it to other people's dream. So I call this story weaving. How can we really enable people to tell their story, to harvest these stories, and to bring them together somehow? So to weave them together, these stories. And I think that can be really transformative um, if we manage to bring dreams together and to create a bigger dream of a community, of a place, how it could be transformed, and and this can also really, I think, to open to crucial questions, to conversations we need to have about yeah, about who owns what on this land, or because it will tell us the difference to today, right? So we can compare our dream landscape with how reality the landscape is today. So and then to ask questions about these gaps, right? So and this can really help in communications to ask the right questions about okay, why do we accept that the cities are still often investing into more concrete, grayness, etc. So to really invite yeah, a conversation about a place, about our living environment, about yeah, about the things we're talking about in society, etc. So yeah, I like to work a lot with imagination and storytelling, and also having conversations about that. But there are also a lot of others, and this is actually what we're trying to do with Restoried. So we're building a community right now, which it works like a space, like this landscape we were trying to visualize earlier, to ground communications back in community and place, while using imagination to really create kind of a pull to this dream. There's kind of a call. There's something within us that fully resonates with this dream, that wants to go there. But on the way, you will learn. You will learn from other perspectives, and maybe the dream will change as well. So it's really, I think it's really a process. It's really um, but it's starting from a perspective of potential rather than the limitations of the present. Yeah, the saying, "The sky is the limit." I think there is only the sky is the limit to kind of push for endless progress, and okay, you can even cross the sky limit and send rockets to Mars. So maybe a regenerative dream would accept that there are natural boundaries, that our bodies have boundaries, that the planet has boundaries. So how can we create actually a dream within the boundaries that are there? So it is not just kind of a fantasy that is irrealistic. It is really using imaginations like for example, Aborigines did with the Dreamtime, to for every human project, they start with dreaming and as a community, and this then will give life to something that should last and be something fertile for at least 7 generations. So that's really a complete shift in how we're usually going about pretty much anything in business as an entrepreneur. To really take this time and also align maybe these efforts to also to the seasons. So to use winter for creative activities, for sensing into the dream, use it really as something to explore. Yeah, the darkness also, and invite the darkness because it is source of the light. And without
Absolutely.
darkness, there's no light, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, I hope that was what you had in mind, or not. Maybe it's also. Uh,
But I really love the exercise. I really love actually sharing about these things because everything that exists start with imagination first, right? Before creating, before acting on it, before deciding if it's worth to move forward with all these tools, thoughts, minds, culture, also, and societies that we're creating right now. And where can we find out about you?
Before I answer that, I would be curious to hear what you actually saw in your landscape, in your dream.
In my landscape, I see more of accepting that being not in the same alignment maybe can be complementary. Having diverse opinions can be also something that help us actually strive. um, Making sure that we create, like my boy like to play with Legos, and I think life sometimes like Legos. We took like the yellow one, the red one, we put them together. They're not the same size. There's the bigger ones, there's the small ones, but we create the castle all together.
Mm,
And this is basically how I see it. How we can, have you said it actually, and we can with everything together. And I think that's important. And I think it's also important in our day and age to honor the fact that we're all coming from different backgrounds, different region of the world, with different perspective, different history as well, and that to value that as a part of our growth, a part of our wealth, also, and also a part of our ecosystem from, I will say, nature perspective, business perspective, human perspective. All that needs to be all together and is one to me, to my eyes. And this is how I see it for the future. Now, that's what I'm trying to bring on the day to day, and make sure to talk to people that are, well, totally opposite, like to me, from maybe mindset even, but nourishing myself with that so that I can also nourish
mm,
my own culture, create new pathways, create new way of thinking,
mm,
and share that diversity that is essential to me, to my little boy who actually represent for me what's gonna the future, literally. Because for me, the future is not tomorrow; it's now.
mm,
Actually, that we're, seeding all the seeds right now, so that we can have something that will bloom with joy and serenity. I love to talk about serenity a lot, but we can be at peace even in the fact that we disagree on different aspects of how the world should be, of the view or the lenses that we want to use
mm,
when it comes to picturing what tomorrow will look like.
mm,
And I see like what I like to say, blossoming, blooming and blossoming, literally together.
mm.
This is how I see it.
Beautiful. I love the analogy of the metaphor of the picture of the Lego building that is being built together like a castle with different competences, and I guess adding a lot of beauty. When you said that, I thought more of a mosaic actually, and I think mosaic. We all have our unique color or pattern, but in the end it all comes together and creates something that is
Absolutely.
more beautiful than it could be just randomly putting pieces together. So something inviting really something bigger that is bigger than ourselves. Mm.
And I think somehow it's important to nurture that, simply because, like everything is mixing. We have fruits these days that didn't exist 100 years ago, for example, and it's an evolution as well. Some people will say like it's some people are playing, scientists somewhere. Yes, there's some, to some extent it's true, but I think the world is called to evolve in many ways. And I think we need to embrace that. It doesn't mean that we have to accept it all, but we need to embrace it and see how we can go along, even if we disagree somehow. And I think in our world, we see, especially in the Western world, we view that disagreeing it's an act of war
Mm.
somehow. But actually, it's an act of peace because we are bridging actually new reflection, new ways of thinking, new approaches, because there's this diversification of way of thinking. And sometimes I do see that we don't value that enough. We need that in order to change the world. We need to have these different views, different perspectives, like you mentioned.
And I think today that's really becoming a big challenge because, as you said, conflict, tension, friction can be really of so much value because it's saying something about maybe about how have we been living together and what kind of wisdom does this hold for us, right? So, and now in
Hmm.
communications, we're designing environments to be as frictionless as possible, but in the end.
Yeah.
It ends producing conflict somewhere else, and whether it's outsourcing. I mean, for AI interfaces of ChatGPT of Kenyan work, 20,000 Kenyan
Hmm.
workers,
Hmm.
so it's not friction. There's no friction for the front user, but there is so much friction and suffering behind in the back end. So I think it's really looking at the whole system again and I think, sitting with the discomfort, learning to sit with the discomfort, learning to host conversation in which it is possible to have divergent views, to allow also to deal with really different worldviews and ideas. So. I think it's really important what you say about accepting this and using this also as a source of innovation. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Mm.
Um, Well, thank you for joining me for Slow is Good. It was really interesting, and I think absolutely we should do it again. And with the exercises, will be absolutely fantastic. And I'm pretty sure all the listeners will appreciate actually to question themselves with the exercises that you shared. And I really want to thank you for that. And also, where we can find out about your work, your art, if I may say.
Yes, thank you so much, Geraldine, for this really interesting conversation. And also hope that we can continue it. And for sure, also on the question of as an entrepreneur, as a slowpreneur, how can we not fall into the same communication traps that are out there. So I think it's important um, to understand what my essence as an entrepreneur is about before going into, or I mean, it can be also in parallel, but to really do this work when we go out into the world, it helps to when we prepare the ground, it can help really to make things easier, much easier later when we have found this essence. It will be much easier to know where we will invest our communication efforts into. Just as a maybe as a closing remark. So I have a website, perspectivist.net, and I'm
Mhm.
also on LinkedIn. If you'd like to add me, it's Jean-Philippe Steeger. where I'm writing about communications, but also leadership and other issues, public affairs. Very happy to have also a chat about communications, about entrepreneurship. So looking forward to to engaging, to having conversations about these issues. And thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the last episode of Slow is Good. Thanks for showing some love. Please share it with your community and your loved ones. Don't hesitate to follow us on social media, on Instagram at Slow is Good. Please share your reviews, feedback, and add some listed stars on iTunes and Spotify. This is very useful for us and to support us and for us to keep on going. I'll see you next time.